Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. We're trying to do we're doing a live webcast here, so it's unpracticed, and we're just doing it off the cuff. So pardon any of the mistakes that I'm likely to make, but I really appreciate you joining me here today. You know, it was more important for me to be able to communicate to you the best information we had about what came out of this last legislative session. Finished 11 hours ago, and we're still going to try to digest everything that happens. It's literally going to take weeks to dig through all the bills and all the nuances that are in there, but there's quite a bit that came out of the session. And so we're here to have something interactive with you. So you got a couple ways that you can ask any questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. You can write an email to talkingorange.utah.gov, and or you can write through the dialog box on the YouTube that you're watching this on your computer. You can write us a question, and I'll do my best to answer any of those questions. Like I said, it's live, so don't laugh too hard at what I do here. So I wanted to cover three basic things here with you today. I wanted to talk to you about what happened for employees. So employee compensation issues, any issues related to employees, I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to talk about what impacts the legislation had on our program, on our ability to do our projects, our maintenance activities, whatever it might be. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some what we call policy bills, some of the bills that took place, and we'll talk a little bit on a few of those. Lots of things took place, but we'll try to summarize that down pretty quick. Before I start, I have to acknowledge the work of our real core team that spent really every day during the session up at the legislature working for us to make this happen. And our team is led by Becky Bradshaw, Linda Hull, who is our legislative and policy director. Linda does an amazing job. She reads all the bills. She can understand everything within these bills so quickly. I have to spend a lot more time trying to get down to the, really the nub of what the issue is. But Linda really led our effort this year, as she has for many years. And then she was assisted this year by Elizabeth Wade. Elizabeth was out of our communications area. Elizabeth does a great job on strategy and putting together presentations, so we thought we'd give her a little more to do, and so she worked with Linda. She was Linda's right-hand person up at the legislature, getting to know the legislators, getting to know the process, and really was a tremendous help for us up there this year. Becky Bradshaw, she's our Director of Finance. Becky led our appropriations effort. It's a huge effort dealing with all the details of our budget. We have a massive budget. Our budget's about $1.1 billion, and it's down to an incredible level of detail, and Becky knows those details. Janet Stedman, who works with Becky, Janet's our budget officer. Janet is behind the scenes every day working back and forth with the Legislative Fiscal Analyst's office, giving them information on every bill that comes out. They're asking us, is there a fiscal impact? And we have to go through a full analysis on what that is. Janet does all that work and makes it happen, so thanks to Becky and Janet. And of course, I can't stop without mentioning our rock star, Shane Marshall. Shane did an amazing job. He was testifying on all kinds of bills. He was explaining how we do our work and what the implications of a bill would mean to the department and our ability to do our work. He's also received the new title as the spreadsheet champion of the legislature. Shane was running more spreadsheets along with Becky, looking at all the different alternatives of what they wanted to do on funding. I couldn't keep track with all the versions of the spreadsheets that Shane had going on right there. So Shane did a great job, and really their work could not have been so successful if it wasn't because of the work of every man and woman for the Department of Transportation. And what I'm talking about is when you do your jobs, when you communicate with the public, you're building trust, and the public sees UDOT in a way, they see it through you, and you're the lens into the department. And because of the trust that the agency has, when we say something, when Shane says something up at the legislature, they believe us, and it takes us so much less time to get things done because you've already helped establish that trust. You, the UDOT employees, are really what keeps Utah moving, and you made a big difference in helping UDOT be successful at this session. So I talked to you already about some of the things I want to touch on here today. So let's get to what I believe is probably the most important topic for you, our employees. And Senate Bill 80 carried the employee compensation piece this session. And employee compensation this year basically boils down to there was a 2% salary increase. It's called a general salary increase for all of our employees. It's not going to move the ranges, so every employee should see this. It'll act like what we call a cost of living increase. Those employees that are at the top of the range or in longevity will see a equivalent one-time bonus. These increases will kick in at the start of our fiscal year. The Utah fiscal year starts July 1, so the pay period starting in 1st of July, and really what will happen is you'll go your 2-week pay period, and then you'll submit your payroll, and then you'll get paid about a week after that. So that's when you'll start to see the increase. One of the things that we had asked for, the governor had asked for, we really thought was successful last year with these targeted funding increases, where we were able to provide several of our employees, classes of employees, an increase above the general increase. And we really thought that worked well, and we wanted to see that happen again. The governor had proposed it in his budget, but that did not come through this session. Now, the legislature had a little bit of a challenge. They have every year, the governor's office and the legislature, they do what they call a consensus revenue projection. And basically they're projecting how much money they expect will be coming in, and then they budget to that. Well, in the middle of February, they do another consensus revenue projection, and this year it came in under what the last projection was. So they essentially had less ongoing money, and which you need for employee compensation. It needs to be ongoing money. They had less money to work with this year, so they had a tough time. Good news on the benefit side, our benefit costs continue to increase. There was a 7.3% increase in our benefit costs. Now that's not the good news. The good news is that the legislature is going to cover that full increase of cost for all of our employees. So we should not see an increase, more taken out of our paychecks to cover those benefits. And basically the retirement accounts were covered as well. So we should see no increases in that area as well. That's really what it came down to for employees this year in terms of the compensation. Now, our programs of how did the legislation impact programs? I'll talk a little bit primarily about what was called Senate Bill 80. Senate Bill 80 was sponsored by Senator Adams. He's the majority whip in the Senate, so he's one of the leaders in the Senate. Many of you may know that he was also the chairman of the Utah Transportation Commission. I've known Senator Adams for 25 years, and he's committed to transportation. This year he was very committed to water infrastructure development. He feels that's important for the growth of the state of Utah. So Senate Bill 80, as originally proposed to take 1/16% sales tax out of the transportation funds and move that over to water development. Now, before I get too far, I'm gonna just maybe step back a little bit. As an organization, UDOT is responsible for managing 4 different funds of money. We have the transportation fund. The funding for that's primarily the state gas tax, vehicle registration fees, and what we use that for is to pay the salaries of the department, all of our maintenance activities, and some of our construction activities come out of that transportation fund. We have a transportation investment fund that's funded primarily with sales tax, and that's the fund where we are able to program the large capacity projects. Then we have a federal highway funds, that's the about $308 million or so a year that comes in, and we use that for pavements and bridges around the state. And then we have a small fund, aeronautics fund. So those are the 4 funds we have. If you're interested in more details on that, you could go to the UDOT website and just type in the search bar, transportation funding presentation, and in there you'll be able to see the details of where the money's coming from and where the money goes. It's a pretty good presentation. But Senate Bill 80 had proposed to take $35 million, $35.7 million in FY17, and that amount would grow because it was a percentage, 1/16%. Take that from the Transportation Investment Fund, essentially, and move that to water. We testified on that bill, and we said that if that bill passed, we would have to work with our Transportation Commission to identify some projects, to delay those projects a year or so, to be able to meet the change in cash flow. Senator Adams did not want to impact transportation. He's been a huge champion, and but he wanted to accommodate the water. Now, the other dynamic in play is, if you remember in the last Talking Orange I gave before the session, Governor Herbert's budget proposal was to take $10 million a year from the Transportation Investment Fund in 17, increase that to $20 million in 18, then go 30, 40, 50 in subsequent years. And so when we worked with the Transportation Commission last April, we actually programmed our projects. We're programmed out through 2022. We programmed our projects to take into account that takedown, that slow incremental takedown out of the Transportation Investment Fund. Well, fast forward, just this last Monday, Senate Bill 80 morphs into kind of a combination of the governor's proposal and what Senator Adams was trying to do. And so we're going to see over the next 5 to 6 years, we're going to see a slow takedown out of Transportation Investment Fund. That some of it will go to education, some of it will go to water infrastructure. There was also a little conversion where the $90 million, we get a direct appropriation into the Transportation Investment Fund, was converted into a percentage. So the advantage of that is that percentage will grow over time. So that would mitigate some of the impacts of that money that was removed. And so bottom line effect here on the department is there will be no delay to the projects that we have programmed out through 2022. So that was good news that the senator was working with us on that, and we were able to get that done, I thought, in a fairly balanced way. Some of the other policy bills that affect us is we had one case here where there's a state law on privacy, and we don't want to invade anyone's privacy as an organization. But there's a state law that says that you cannot collect anyone's location data, so you can't find out where people are without their consent. And we didn't want to know that. We wanted to collect anonymous data. We wanted to purchase anonymous data and use that information to better manage our transportation system and our construction projects as well. And so we worked through the interim session, working with the legislature, letting them know what the concerns were, and then we found a sponsor, and we were able to move a bill through the session. It passed yesterday, and basically it's going to allow us to purchase anonymized data from private vendors. Now, we already received a question from one of our employees, and I'll just read it. I may have gotten ahead of the answer here, but Grant Farnsworth wrote this email. He wrote this yesterday at 2:21, so he was already anticipating the bill passing. It hadn't quite passed yet, but he said about 9 months ago, all the Bluetooth sensors being used by UDOT were removed because they violated Utah's privacy laws. And I've heard that a bill was likely to pass and allow us to purchase probe data from third party. Can you update us on the status? Well, Grant, as I said, that bill passed. There was quite a bit of discussion because we want to find that right balance between protecting private information as well as being able to take advantage of this new world of big data. And so it's a very, I thought, a very good balance, and we appreciated this discussion that took place. Now, some of the other bills that we had asked for, one of the ones that we had asked for is we had been having some challenges with some of our construction projects when they were operating at night. As you know, we're trying to do the best we can to do our work but not have impacts to the traveling public as well as the businesses. So we ask that our contractors work at night a lot of times. Well, when we work at night, sometimes we make noise, and when we make noise, we keep people from sleeping. And so we were having challenges working through that right balance. And so all through the summer and fall, we worked with the counties, cities, on trying to find a way to balance this and find a better way to give direction to our contractors. So we found what we call this, the term we hear up there a lot of times is this is a consensus bill. That means everyone agrees. When legislators hear it's a consensus bill, it goes through a lot easier. So we found consensus between the cities and the counties and the department. So now we have a process in place where we're going to evaluate the way that, the type of work that has to take place. We're going to coordinate as a department with the appropriate county or city on what activities will take place, what kind of noise mitigation needs to take place. And then when we put out the contract, our contractors are going to know how they can construct the job, they can give us better bids, and we can have better assurity to our public on when certain work activity is going to take place. So that was really, I considered that a success, and really the way you get to success in almost anything, if you remember one of our emphasis areas, it's collaboration. And so we spent a lot of time collaborating to be able to get there. And the last policy bill I'll mention at this point was Senate Bill 86. And one of the things that we've been having challenges with is we're a fast-growing state, and in order to keep our school children educated, what we do is we build a lot of schools. And the department never had the ability to know where schools were going to be located. So too often we were forced to be able to work with schools that were already in place and trying to find ways to have safe routes for the children to walk and bike to school, or where they would make left turns, whatever it might be. And so in this bill, we just asked that when a school district is considering purchasing property to build a new school, one of the touch points is they come talk to the department, and we can then help provide them with information on the best ways for school kids to be able to access those schools in a safe way, and for cars as well. So we're really happy with the outcome on that bill. So that's really what I had to report here today, and it looks like I'm getting handed some questions here. So let's see here. Why do we have an aeronautics division? That's a good question. We have an aeronautics division, and it sits within our operations group. So Jason Davis leads our operations group. Pat Morley is the division director over our aeronautics division. They have a couple of really important missions that the aeronautics division does. They work with all the local airport operators, and they work with them to make sure that they have safe runways, taxiways, that they have all the electronics that are needed for planes to be able to land safely. When you think about our large state, we're an urban state and we're a rural state, and a lot of our more rural parts of our state depend heavily on these airports for medical emergencies and for commerce. These airports are used constantly. And so we, as a division of aeronautics, we work with the Federal Aviation Administration, and we're the ones that help move that contract money through and try to get it out to those airports so that we can have a safe operating airport system around the state. It's part of keeping Utah moving, and the Aeronautics Division also operates the state planes. We have a couple of King Air planes. We have a 200, which is an 8-passenger seating plane with 2 pilots, and we have a 6-seater, a 90. And those planes are operated, and we basically, state agencies can reserve those planes, and they use them to travel around the state. And the biggest user is probably the University of Utah and the health department, and it's because they get volunteer doctors who volunteer their time, and they go do health clinics around the state. And those planes are used mostly by those organizations as well. So I hope that answered your question. We have another question, and the print's a little small. Let me look at this. I have heard that we are pretty close to the end of our snow removal budget for the year. What happens if we have 1 or 2 more big storms this spring? How will that be paid for? And this is from one of our maintenance guys who asked to remain anonymous. All right. Well, bottom line is, we budget for our storms. We take the last 4 years and we use that as a way to try to project how much money we need to put into the budget for next year. But that's all contained within the line item that's funded by the legislature. It's an operations line item. Out of that line item is funded all of our maintenance employees, your salaries, the money to pay for our equipment and materials, as well as our construction employees are funded out of that line item as well. So we set aside about $25 million each year. It varies up and down each year. And we then track that with storms. And the southern part of our state, Region 4, is a little closer to being at their, it's projected that they're going to be closer to their, hitting their budget or going a little over. In the northern part of the state, we're not seeing it as that close. But at the end of the day, we're going to, if it snows, we're going to plow it, and we will manage the other activities that we have planned through the rest of the year in order to be able to come within budget. So we will have enough money to be able to keep our roads clear and keep Utah moving. Another question. This is bigger print. Okay. Why is UDOT responsible for avalanche control? Is this in relation to Jason Davis's Talking Orange? Interesting development on this. Back in, I believe it was 1982, is when UDOT assumed responsibility for avalanche control in Big Cottonwood and Little Cottonwood, and that was really the canyons where most of that took place. There was a little bit of work at that time taking place in Provo Canyon as well. But the Forest Service did it before that, and the Forest Service was seeing budget cuts and they were backing away. And what happens at the end of the day, it's the Department of Transportation's responsibility for making sure that that road is open and people can get to the resorts and commerce can flow back and forth. And so there was an agreement back in 1982 where the department took over the responsibility to make sure that the roads are safe to travel. So it's probably no different than why do we plow the roads or why do we fill the potholes. We're making sure that the roads are safe and accessible for the public to be able to get to where they want to get to. So that's why we do avalanche control. So I think I'm seeing folks shaking their heads. Nobody else has any questions. That means I did either a really good job or you've all fallen asleep or you're off to lunch already. So again, thank you for watching. If you do think of any questions that you want us to answer, send me an email at talkingorange@utah.gov and we will respond to your questions. And I really appreciate everything you folks do. And have a great, safe weekend. Remember, put your phone down.